Welcome everyone to the Sports Club Development webcast series brought to you by Wyndham City Council. My name is James Robertella, Inclusion and Participation Officer, and I would like to begin by acknowledging traditional custodians of the land in which we electronically meet today, and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people here today and those that may be joining us. This series, in this series, we look to sit down with Wyndham Club representatives and subject matter experts to discuss key topics which aim to support and upskill all local sporting clubs and associations that operate within Wyndham. As I said, my name is James Robertella, and I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Camilla Briggs, Gender Equality in Wyndham Sport Project Officer.
Hello. Today's episode is Gender Equality, and we have some exciting guests to introduce. Welcome, Dr. Jessica Crofts. Jessica is a Gender Equity Project Officer for Sport and Recreation Victoria and is our subject specialist. Jessica has a doctorate in philosophy, sociology and gender studies and has worked closely with sports clubs and organisations to help them to become more welcoming to girls and women and gender equal. In her current role, she is supporting councils, regional sports assemblies and sporting associations who are working with clubs to help improve their gender equality. We also have Leanne Mayer. Leanne is Head of Women's Football at Point Cook Central's Football Club. Leanne was instrumental in setting up and coaching their inaugural senior women's football team and plays a key role in supporting the girls and women in the club's football stream, alongside coaching in the senior women and under 14 girls team. Thank you so much for being with us today. So just to start off, Jess, why do we need to help our sports clubs to be more gender equitable? What does this look like?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Before I start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we're meeting today, acknowledging that I'm currently on Wurundjeri country and that sovereignty has never been ceded. And I would like to express my sincerest and truest hopes for quick justice and reconciliation. So thinking about why do we need gender equity in sports clubs, it's a really good question. And I think it's important to acknowledge that sports clubs have been traditionally set up around the needs of men and they've been male-dominated spaces. And so acknowledging this, we can say, this is the history of our sport. It's not that it's particularly anyone's fault that it's been done this way, but we all have a responsibility to come into our clubs now and say, what actions can we take to make sure that we are implementing gender equity and that women and girls can come into our club and feel welcome and included. And so I think it's also really important to acknowledge that they're such influential spaces in our communities. So they have such an important role at showing what does inclusive and safe spaces look like and demonstrating that for the rest of our community.
Fantastic. Leanne, what does this look like in practice at the Sharks?
Yes, thank you for having me today as well. So at the Sharks, it is, I guess the famous word of being inclusive. Being recently appointed the head of women's football there, it's to have a point of contact, I guess, because as Jess mentioned, it was generally a male-dominant world. It was built around that. And that's certainly changing, with the introduction of, I guess even the Matildas, the soccer team and AFLW and the Boomers and so forth. There's a lot of great female role models, and I guess bringing those down into local communities is certainly setting an example for the young girls these days and women who just want to give it a go. So at the Sharks, there's all sorts of things like there's no priority given to, the male teams versus the female teams. We have board members, we have committee members of both genders, right through from juniors all the way up to seniors. No longer is there a female only in the canteen. It's that we have the men jump in there just as much as the women, and just trying to set those standards high and just being a good role model, no matter of a gender, I think is what's most important. And that's something that we definitely do at the Shark. So, yeah, it's a great community to be a part of, that's for sure.
Jess, you talked about earlier around the role of sports clubs within communities. So if a club is to be more gender equitable, that can mean safer, stronger, more inclusive, better connected communities. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I was just thinking that when Leanne was talking as well, is that clubs are almost they are a microcosm of our wider society. So we're not seeing gender equality throughout our wider society, and we're seeing those practices being replicated in sport, but we're also seeing these great initiatives like Leanne has clearly thought about what does it mean in her sports club to make sure that women are women's teams have been prioritised just as much as men's, and they aren't having women only in the canteen. And I think it gives us really good, tangible examples and ideas that need to be spread across the whole of our community as well, because we know that family violence is really prevalent in our communities, and we've been talking a lot more about that at the moment. So this is being filmed during the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, and we know that it's an epidemic in Australia. So 1 in 4 women have experienced physical violence from a current or former partner, and it's almost 1 woman a week is killed by her current or former partner in Australia each year. So really awful statistics, and really awful effects on people's lives as well. We have to acknowledge that when we're talking about that, those are statistics, but people live with the effects of violence every day. And so sports clubs are a really fantastic place to come in and say, we want to make sure that we are embedded gender inequality here, because gender inequality drives violence against women. And so if we want to address violence against women and address those terrible statistics, we actually need to be making sure that we're working towards equality, and that we are using all of the different tools, all of the different influences, all of the different settings that we can, and sport being such a good one to have these conversations and to make sure that we are embedding this change.
Leanne, you talked about some of the elements of what's happened down at the Point Cook Sharks. Are there any thoughts that you have around changing these gender norms? That might be the boys and the girls training together, and what that means for respect, in future as they begin to grow up. Is there any thoughts that you could provide within that space?
Big yes, which is great. I guess coaching junior girls is where it starts. So the junior girls that join our club, they don't play girls football. They play football, male, female. And so when I, post on our club's Facebook page and our social media, they're footballers. We refer to them as footballers. They're not, girls who play football, and it's not girls footy or boys footy. We play the same game with the same rules and the same expectations. So, the code of conduct is the same. The attendance records, everything is done the same. Because it is absolutely no different. So, we do have no team gets a preference for training nights or for ground allocations or anything like that. We start with the senior men and the women because their kicks are bigger. So they take up more ground space, and then we work down from there. So, we go to the 18 boys and girls, and then we go to the 16 boys and girls. And, it's purely about space. It's not treated any differently. All coaches get to put in a preference, and the club do the best that they can and work around these preferences. So we're generally, each team trains as individuals. And then at the Sharks, we do certainly try and have the boys and the girls training together just to gain that mutual respect, so that they can see that girls kick a football in the same action that the boys kick a football. They tackle just like the boys do. Nothing changes. And it's certainly, that inclusivity is just, I guess we're setting the standard for, the younger generation coming through. And it works perfectly because that's the expectation at the club. And if you want to be at the club, then this is what we do, and this is how we I guess, deliver it to everybody. So, yeah.
And we know that doesn't happen at a lot of clubs. So it's such amazing examples, Leanne. And we know that for a lot of clubs, boys and girls train separately, but then boys are given preference over the training times and the grounds and the change room allocation. And when it comes to calling out the teams, the boys team is called out first and the girls team is a bit of an add-on there. And that really highlights the way that women are often devalued in sport. So it's so important that a team like yours, Leanne, comes forward and says, no, we're actually going to do the work to demonstrate that both these groups are as valuable as each other, and we're putting actions in place to make sure that we're showing everyone, boys and girls, that they are equal.
Absolutely. And it wasn't always like this. We did have to start at the very beginning, and it doesn't happen overnight. And, potentially not everyone's on board at the start. The old, back in the day, I guess it was Thursday night was club selection night, and the senior, reserves coach would get up there and read the team, and then the senior, the ones coach would get up there and read the team. And now on a Thursday night, whoever wants to go first goes first. If I go first this week, that's great. If, Darren goes first the next week, then that's great. There's no standard, and it's the men sit there and actively listen to me talk about the women's team, and the women's team sit there and actively listen to the men's coach and hear him talk. So we don't even talk about who goes first or who goes second or anything like that, because it's just present. We all want to be there and respect each other, and we all get served a meal and we all listen to our coach, and if we have a win, we cheer together. And if there's a milestone in either team, it's publicised that we have a milestone. It's not this is a thing in women's sport or in men's sport or in this league. You celebrate together and you commiserate together, and that's something that the club are exceptional on. And we're still learning. I would be lying if I said we were perfect. We've still got hiccups along the way, but that's okay. We're all learning. No one is certainly perfect, and we ride it out together. So yeah, it's great.
Superb. It sounds like really the club has really embraced gender equality. It's just kind of innate. It's just part of your decisions that you make.
Absolutely.
Why does gender inequality exist?
So a big question.
Massive.
So what we know is that, like, if we're talking about sports clubs, we know they've been set up around particular needs, and they've been set up around the needs of men. And no one's gone, we don't necessarily go in and put our gender lens on and say, how are these policies and procedures affecting men and women differently? And what was really interesting, and I'd be really keen to know from Leanne as well, is how did the Sharks start that process of having a look at what gender inequality looked like and how they were going to address it? And we know that it's, quite often people's unconscious bias or unintentional bias, where they haven't actually thought about what they're doing in their club that is affecting men and women differently. So they often, you hear people say, oh, we just do it because we've always done it this way. This is just how it's done. We did it last year. We're going to keep going with it. And it's not often until you go into a club and have these conversations around what are our values, who do we want to be as a club, and how are we going to get there. And you have to have, you have to be really intentional about it, because otherwise we just fall back into the old ways of doing things. So when we go into clubs, we might do a gender audit or a facilities audit where you walk around and get different views from men and women about, how does it feel to be in our club rooms? And, a man might say, feels great. A woman might say, you know what? It doesn't feel like I actually fit in or belong here, because I can't see any trophies of women. I can't see any photos of women. There's no signage on the women's bathrooms. Men have got bathrooms and women have got bathrooms that have got the all accessible signs, or, this isn't a space that has been set up for me and my needs. And so it's actually about consulting and asking women around what does that gender inequality look like, that we can actually address what their needs are and what they'd like to see. So I'm also really keen to hear from Leanne around how did their club actually start that process and have that conversation?
Thank you, Jess. My first reaction, I guess, is to say that it was a slow process, but I guess reflecting on that a few years ago, we've moved quite quickly with the times. Starting out with an under 15 girls, we started with one team. And then from there we built on, and we had women interested, and then we, did a senior women's team. And, it doesn't need to go from 0 to 100 in 12 months, just let it happen naturally, I guess. Keep being positive, keep promoting all the wonderful things that you're doing. Tell the girls to talk about football. That's where it comes down. When your friends say to you, what did you do on the weekend? You can say, actually, I got to go and tackle someone. I kicked a goal. I played in the mud, and we won, just talk about it like you would talk about, going to dance lessons or going to the swimming pool or, anything like that, because often that's the positive language that these kids use is exceptional. And I think that's where it starts. And so, we slowly built team by team. And I guess reflecting back on when I played football a very long time ago now, it was in a boys' team. And I had to stop playing I could play to under 12s, and then I had to stop playing football because girls weren't allowed to play football after that. It was too dangerous. And there was no junior kind of girls football competitions. And that stings, I still wear that to this day. And then 5 years later, I could get back into it because I was then old enough to play in the women's football competition. So there was a big gap there, and that's a lot of things of skill development, camaraderie, but I loved the game. So I was a boundary umpire, I was a team manager, I was an administrator, I was all of those things around the football club. So, it's interesting how times have changed, and it's so refreshing to know that, if I look this way, there's boys and girls training. And if I look that way, there's senior men and senior women training. And the boys' bathrooms are just as far away as the women's bathrooms, and we've got both of those. And some clubs in our particular league, the Western Region Football League, have now got 2 lots of change rooms. And if there is a women's or a girls' games on there, then those change rooms are for the girls or the women's, but they're a mirror image of each other. It's not a case of we'll make this one smaller or we'll make this one bigger or we'll put more showers in. They're exactly the same. And that's exactly how they should be, because they're footballers getting changed. They're not there doing anything else. They are simply getting changed. So in a perfect world, we would have 2 lots of change rooms at every club, but everything costs money. So it's not necessarily about the women. It's just the sport is growing and all sports are growing. So, if we're playing on the same day, you just make it work, and you do what's best for the girls and you do what's best for the boys. You always have the club at the forefront. How does this look for us? How are the players going to feel when we roster a timetable, when we have an in the club room, in the change room time and out of the change room time? So just small things add up to, making a big positive impact, not only for the children, but for the parents. Not only for the players, I should say, but for the parents and for the supporters, to see this smooth transition of boys running out and then girls going into the change room, and there's no fuss. There's no one directing traffic. It's just this respect that we have at our club and these standards that we set from the day dot when you join our club, that we are an all-inclusive club and this is how it operates. You're either on board or you're not. So, it's baby steps, but baby steps go a long way. Yeah.
Jess, you touched on a bit earlier that our sports clubs are at the forefront of the community, and they're very community facing. And you also touched on the 4 drivers of violence against women and the role that our sports clubs can play in addressing that across the broader community. Are you able to explain to us a bit around, what those 4 drivers are and what they might look like in a community sports setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So Our Watch is the national body for preventing violence against women and their children, and they've provided us with this framework called Change the Story, which is an incredible framework that talks around what are the drivers of violence against women and what are the actions we can take to prevent violence. And the work that we do and that you guys at Wyndham have been doing as well is thinking about what do these drivers look like in a sports setting? And if we think around other initiatives happening in our community, so respectful relationships curriculum, that goes into schools and thinks around what does these drivers look like in schools and what can we do in this setting. So that framework is identified as sport as really key. So there are 4 drivers. So the first one is the condoning of violence against women. And it looks like that acceptance or trivialisation or minimising of violence against women. So not taking it seriously and not calling it for what it is. And so there's some ads on TV at the moment, Respect Women, Call It Out. And there's also a really good ad that shows an example of a young boy pushing a girl over and runs away, and the girl's mum comes over and says, well, he just does it because he likes you. So it's that sort of myth or mentality that it's okay to be violent, or that boys will be boys, and it's not on. And we know this, and we can see a lot of sports clubs calling out this sort of behaviour. Sometimes, though, we also see sports clubs not taking it seriously when some of their male players have been accused of violence. And we often see this when they're really high achieving players. And so that's what it might look like in a club. The second driver is rigid gender stereotypes and roles. And Leanne's already touched on this quite a lot. And it's, stereotypes like, well, girls don't play footy, so we're not going to invest in the girls' team, or, girls aren't as strong or they aren't as good at it. And also things such as women work in the canteens, men are presidents, women can only coach the girls' team, they can't coach the boys' team. So putting our kind of gender lens on and thinking around what is gender stereotypes playing out in our clubs and how can we address them. The third driver is men's decision-making and limits to women's independence. So whether or not, women are given decision-making roles or supported to make decisions that are going to affect them in the club, but also making sure that we consult women about any decisions that are going to affect them. So talking to the girls around what they need, how they feel at the club, what would make it better. And the final one is male-peer relationships that emphasise disrespect towards women or aggression. So that's that locker room talk that we hear about, and, really bonding together over disrespect of women. So, having online jokes or memes or discussions around women that are really disrespectful or sexualising of women. And so, we might see that in a sports club in terms of their Mad Monday events or in terms of their, social get-togethers or events. So there's lots of different places where we might see it, but then there's also lots of opportunities where we can challenge these drivers of violence against women.
Leanne, you've given us such fantastic insight into the Point Cook Sharks, but from what Jess was just saying there, are there any examples or anything that sort of stands out from either one of those or all of those drivers that your team and your leadership and the club is really looking to address?
Yeah, definitely. There was a few trigger points as Jeff was talking that I was like, tick, 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 or, oh, no, we could work a little bit more on that. So thank you, Jeff, first of all, let me say that. In regards to, I guess, accepting or condoning violence, as I mentioned before, we all follow the same code of conduct, and both men and women sign that, and juniors. We also have a parental code of conduct. So again, it's irrelevant of gender. We all need to stick to the same rules, and to me, that's exactly how it should be. So that's something that we're very big on. There is a code of conduct, and there are consequences of that, and gender is irrelevant when it comes to, I guess, a punishment or a consequence when it comes to violence or anything of the sort. In regards to the decision making, I guess, as I mentioned before, it's not just the females that work in the canteen, and they're up until now, we've had a small representation of, I guess, the women and the young girls playing football. And now there are more and more women on the committee. Females have always had a strong presence at the club. But, you know, there are a lot of roles that are, you know, allocated to women because they're the best candidates, you know, not because they're good at paperwork or because, you know, they might know how to cook up a pie or anything like that. If you're the best candidate for the role, that's the way it's decided. So, yeah, it's certainly, you know, empowering, and they're not, I guess they're not being excluded from any role opportunities. So yeah, it's certainly great. And, you know, we do have, we still have young girls that still play in the boys' teams, so to speak, and they're allowed to do so. So that's that young child and their parents' choice, you know. So we still give the players the opportunity. If they're eligible to play, then they have the opportunity of playing whichever in under 12's team that they want to, or under 14's team or 10's team. So, you know, it's just giving that choice. And as we mentioned, you know, with the locker room, it's asking for feedback, you know, making sure that events and functions aren't gender-based, making sure that, you know, both males and females can attend. And, you know, now the women have a Mad Monday as much as the men have a Mad Monday, so to speak. In fact, the women probably, you know, dress, you know, their costumes are probably outdoing the men's at the moment, I would like to think. So, yeah, it's interesting to see. It's very equal now, specifically, obviously, at our club. You know, the social media representation is the same. You know, if we're posting an event or we're talking about a milestone, as I mentioned before, you know, it doesn't matter which team they come from, we're celebrating together. So, yeah, it's just remaining consistent, I think, across the board, and that is just so important. And it's not about, you know, just about the women. It is just remaining consistent with the message that we're, you know, that we're aiming to achieve. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So many wonderful examples there that sort of like I'm just listening and just thinking and sort of being absorbed. But thinking about sort of what you've been talking about, it could say if I have my club, do you think I could just take some of those strategies and just literally just implement them in my club, or do I need to kind of like think a bit around it a bit more?
So what we would suggest is that every single club is different and it has its own different history, its own different makeup, its own different community that it can draw on in terms of retention, recruitment and retention. And so it's sitting down as a committee or as a club or bringing in a number of different voices and doing something like going through a gender audit. So having a look at lots of different aspects of the club. So thinking around governance and leadership, thinking around facilities, around participation, around club culture, and around recruitment, and having a look at what are we doing really well, what's working for us here, and what can we be doing better. And one way that we've found is really useful for clubs is for them to be speaking to each other. So we might be doing something really well at our club, but we've just found out that the Sharks are doing this other strategy and that's working really well for them. So we might try it with our club as well. But it's really around learning from each other and picking up on these ideas and having these discussions with other people, but also learning from the women in our clubs. So that gender audit is a really good process because you can sit down and say, you know, how do you feel around the lighting here? How do you feel around how Thursday night dinners are going? And get their feedback and see what their ideas are. So it's really important that we consult and listen, but it's actually also really important that we take that feedback on board and that we're implementing it and that we're working towards change. And like Leanne said, it doesn't all have to come at once. But you might do, you know, something like an audit and come up with 20 fantastic ideas and say, all right, these are the 3 we're going to start with. And we'll work towards some of the other ones, but let's tick off these 3 boxes. And let's make sure that we're sharing and celebrating and talking to people about what we're doing. Because again, like Leanne said, it is a slow journey. And we need to make sure we're bringing everyone on board with us as we make this change, and celebrating those wins is really important, and talking about, you know, what difference is it making at our club. So definitely not one size fits all model, but I think what is so crucial here is that we're consulting with women and we're talking to different people at our club and bringing everyone along with us.
Yes, absolutely. And I think player and member and supporter surveys, sometimes we don't always want to ask for feedback, but it's how we grow as a club, as a committee, as people. You think about being a child and your parents always going, no, that's not the right way to do that, or this is the right way to do that, or why don't you give this a go? As adults, we can still take on that feedback, and that's how we grow. And I guess, be the role models that we need to be for the younger generation coming through. It's really important as a club to understand how your club works, set some values, set, the code of conduct and some guidelines, know your members, whether they be supporters, the ones that are just coming down on a Saturday to watch the football because they enjoy the game, or the participants or parents, ask for that feedback, I guess. Don't be scared of that feedback. And as you mentioned, if we get a list of 20 things, if 5 are a top priority, go back to the members and say, okay, by the end of, the year, we would like to achieve these 5 things. We saw this was the most common denominator and we're going to try and fix that or introduce that, and be really vulnerable with them. It's definitely not perfect, but just listening and then acting on that is so important. And it's small things that just make such a big difference. Like the Thursday nights. It doesn't always suit us to necessarily train on a Thursday night, but I know we've got the opportunity there to train on a Thursday night and to read out our teams, or to celebrate a milestone on social media. It wasn't an option previously, and now it is. Having AFLW players come down just as much as AFL players come down, giving the kids role models, and not just have an AFLW player for the girls, have an AFLW player for the girls and the boys team. Just like the AFL player, they get around to both the girls and the boys team. They're still a role model in their own right. They're still playing their sport at their elite level. So let's get it out there for them. Again, just small things, just make a really big difference. Start small and then it'll happen before you know it, and you'll be much bigger than day one. So, yeah.
And if clubs are out there wondering where to get their hands on a sports club gender audit or a membership survey, please jump onto Wyndham's Women in Sport page. They're accessible, downloadable, and again easy to implement. But the Sport and Recreation team is here to help you should you have any questions with those measures. Jess, we've covered gender equality quite in depth, and it's been fantastic to hear Leanne's perspective. I suppose for a lot of us, we talk about the gender lens a lot. What does this term actually mean, and how can we do this or others do this as well really easily?
Yeah. So essentially a gender lens is acknowledging that men and women experience the world differently, and that policies and procedures and different actions that we take will have different effects on these groups. So a really good example is of like doing a facility audit. You might go and have a look around the lighting situation and see that, the lights are on the oval, but there aren't any lights in the car park. And so for a man, they might not think that that's a problem, but if you were to ask a woman, she might say, look, actually, I'm not comfortable walking to my car in the dark. That's something I really don't feel safe about, and it's actually meant that I don't come to trainings during winter when it's really dark. So it's acknowledging that, if you're not a woman, you might not be able to understand how that's affecting her unless you do that consultation and talking to her. So essentially, I really like that example as well of Leanne's, of having a look at social media, putting our gender lens on really simply and going through something like our social media or our web page and saying, all right, how many men here, how many women? What is the gender balance here? Putting our gender lens on. And then thinking around, well, what might it be like for a woman coming onto our Facebook page? What might she be feeling compared to what a man might be feeling? Really important as well to acknowledge that not all women are the same and not all men are the same. And so when we put on a gender lens, we also have to think, well, what might it feel like for a woman with a disability coming into our sports club? And is it accessible for her? What might it feel like for a woman from a multicultural background to be in this space? So it is around putting on our gender lens and just thinking about it in terms of men and women and gender diverse people, but then we still have to go further and think who else is in our community and making sure that we're capturing or that we're thinking about all different people and that we're not just thinking about women as that homogenous group.
Absolutely. Social media definitely is a big one that I guess is so prevalent in 2020. And it doesn't mean that the women have to have equal social media, advertising and celebrations as much as the men do, I guess. There still is a lot more men playing the sport, and we have 2 senior men's teams at the club. So, if they have more social media, that's okay because it's all within balance. It doesn't mean we have to go male, female, male, female. It's just about balance and just being aware, I guess, that there are women and there are men and there are, different races and diversities and, inclusions that we need to consider when we do post on social media.
So some really, really sort of vivid sort of explanations about how to use a gender lens and what really is that difference. And I guess we can, I'm seeing here a lot of the benefits of what gender equality in community sport might be, but are there any other ones that kind of maybe we haven't sort of talked about so far, kind of like of how it's better for men, women, girls, boys, people from different backgrounds, people with different abilities? What are those benefits of gender equality in community sport?
Yeah, so something we haven't talked about that you just touched on there, Camilla, is the way that gender equality is good for men as well. And it's this idea that, we are all constrained by these gender stereotypes and these rigid gender stereotypes of men should do this and women should do this. And that idea of men and women as being a binary is also really harmful for people who don't fit into that binary, so gender diverse people as well. And so we need to have these really broad conversations around what is gender equality, so that we're making sure that we talk about how challenging gender stereotypes and gender norms are going to really benefit gender diverse people. And they're also going to really benefit men as well. Because men are still restricted in these norms of this is what a real man is. A real man is tough, a real man is strong, a real man is athletic, a real man plays footy. And we know that that doesn't work for everyone and that boys and men are being constrained by that as well. So we want to have clubs where all people can come in and have the choice of what they participate in and be free to be whoever they are. So we want to see clubs where women are playing those traditionally male-dominated sports, but men are playing those traditionally female-dominated sports and not being punished or policed by that as well. So not being called particular names or told that they're playing a sport that isn't as good as footy. They might be playing netball. And so we want to make sure that everyone is getting the benefits of talking about what does it look like to have a world that isn't constrained by gender, and everyone is being able to be themselves. Mm. And this is kind of the healthy masculinities that we want to see embedded in our clubs. And we know that there's an amazing piece of work called the Man Box Study that interviews men who sit inside this man box of rigid gender stereotypes and norms. And we know that men who sit inside this box, they're involved in things such as risky drinking, as risky driving, in perpetrating violence against other men, in perpetrating violence against other women, but also experiencing really negative side effects too, like poorer mental health and poorer physical health as well. So in addressing gender equality, we can actually make sure that we are providing or that we're supporting men to be healthier as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think back to, I guess, junior, and Thursday night meals were always deep fried, whatever it is, and it's such a small part. But now we actually gender equality and I guess being inclusive is we take into considerations like diet, and we ask the players what their diet is like. And, it's more than just playing the game. So there's equality and I guess inclusivity on all aspects of community sport. And as Jess touched on before, can they access the club rooms? Is there a safe place for people to get changed? So it is just setting those examples, I guess, wider than just men and women. It's equality in general. And again, just being consistent with those messages that we're sending out.
Fantastic. Jess, you touched on the role that men can play across community and in particular in sport. How can men contribute towards greater gender equality at their sports club?
Yeah. So men can educate themselves around gender equality and what it means and what it looks like and what strategies we can take to address it. So they can go onto the Wyndham website and have a look at what are the tools and the case studies and the examples that are being used. They can have a look at Change Our Game website and have a look at what are the tools that we're producing and where they can be supporting women in leadership roles. And essentially they can be listening to the women at their club around what they need and supporting those actions. It might be that, maybe at the beginning they don't totally understand the importance of it, but it's around listening to the women and supporting them in their needs.
Leanne, what about you? Have you seen some male leaders step up at the club? Undoubtedly so, but is there anything that sort of stands out with regard to the role that men play down at the Point Cook Sharks?
Definitely. In the first year of having a girls and a women's team, the supporter base and the fans watching was quite small. Whereas now we, encourage the men to come along and watch the women. It's the same sport, but it is a different style of football. And just as we encourage the women, though, to get down and support the men. So again, it's not necessarily one-sided, but the men have certainly stepped up, and the support that they give the women at the club has certainly improved a lot. And it is encouraged by from the men's coach and from the committee. It is encouraged both ways. So it's not just one person saying, it's not me preaching saying, come down and watch and, encourage the women. It's everyone's on board. And we do get a lot of the men, and boys watching the girls and the women play. And the women, have a huge presence. I guess something that the men have realised at social functions, and the club certainly recognised that last year at our awards night, at our presentation event, that the women were very, I guess, probably a bigger stakeholder in all of our social functions than the men, because they love it just as much as the men. So, they've certainly seen that not only can women play sport, but, they can go off and have fun as well after the game and whatnot. So, it's encouraged both ways, definitely.
I suppose, we've talked a bit around the roles men can play, but what are the benefits of greater gender equality at the sports club for men? Jess, did you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I guess when we talk about gender equality in sport, we're talking about a better club. A club that people want to join, a club that people want to be a part of, a club that women and girls feel safe and included, and so do men and boys. And so, the benefits for men are kind of the benefits for everyone, aren't they? Like, you're going to have a club where you're going to have more membership, you're going to have more volunteers, you're going to have more spectators, you're going to have that friendly family vibe, and men really benefit from that as much as anyone else. So it's about saying, there are going to be specific benefits for men in terms of make sure we have these healthier masculinities and where men feel more free to make different or choices in their club around how they participate and what they participate in. But just generally, we're going to have a better club for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm just then when you were talking, I thought of this TV commercial, and I think it's a campaign. It's Fun Like a Girl campaign. And it's a terrific campaign that's out there. And, you know, they ask boys and girls and men and women to run like a girl. And, you know, a few people get up there and they run, for lack of a better term, awkwardly. And then they, you know, the person running the campaign says, is that how your sister runs? You know, is that how your mum runs, or is that how you run? And then they go, no. And then they run like they normally would. And just to see that difference, it's just the language around running like a girl and then just running. You know, it's not running like a girl or running like a boy. It's how you run. So, you know, there are so many benefits of gender equality, from, you know, toddlers right through to teenagers, hormonal teenagers at that, and then, you know, up into the men's and the women's teams. So I think as we learn and we grow as a club and as a community, the men will become a better role model for their network of people. So in the workplace, in their community sport, in their family, for their children, or, you know, their partners. So there are so many benefits that we just don't realise to, you know, gender equality and, again, equality in general. So, yeah, huge. I think it's underestimated what the impact that a local club can have on a person.
It feels like, in a way, it's kind of creating that support across clubs and communities to help everybody to become their best. You know, we can build each other up as building blocks and yeah, just support each other as we go. I was just thinking there, though, I mean, we talk about all the benefits and there are so many, but, you know, is it possible for gender equality to go too far? I mean, I know we kind of, you know, people will be having these thoughts about, yes, but it's all about women and it's all about girls, and you know, you're pushing the men to the back. Is that what we're doing? Is there that chance that might happen?
Yeah, so I guess sometimes when you feel like you have, or when you've been given unfair advantages or privileges, so let's say the men always having the change rooms, even though there's only one lot of change rooms, they might feel like something's been taken away from them. If we say, actually, every second week we're going to make sure the women have the change rooms and the men don't. And so it's around framing it to say, this isn't around you having something taken off you. Absolutely, you only get the change rooms every second week, but that's actually around fairness and the way that our club is evolving and the way that now we have women members and girl members, and we actually want to make sure that we are an inclusive club that welcomes these members in and that we're sharing the resources that we have fairly. So making sure that we're not framing it as you're losing something. You are having less access if we've got limited resources, but we're all benefiting in terms of having that strong club that has those really good values and that has gender equality embedded throughout it. So you're winning in that sense as well. So it really is about coming in and thinking about how we're framing these messages and how we're talking to all of our members around the benefits that come with gender equality.
Absolutely. It's certainly not all about the women, and I think I've been very, you know, prevalent in saying so, that it is just about being consistent. You know, if there are more, you know, social media around the men's teams, it's just because they're bigger. You know, it's not because they're favoured or, you know, it's a business or any of such sort. It's purely because there might be 2-to-1 men's versus women's teams. You know, we might have 15 boys teams and say 6 girls teams. So, you know, there might be more male appearance on social media or around the club. And that's just purely based on the numbers that play. So, as Jess said, it's certainly not about taking anything away or, you know, anyone losing or missing out. It's just doing what's fair and just for everybody. And that's when those member surveys, you know, and participant surveys and so forth, you know, can be very beneficial, because you are listening to both, or all, I should say, men, women, boys, girls, parents, you know, and tailoring it to those user groups and getting the feedback from both parties, because we don't just want feedback from the women and from the girls, we want it from everybody. So that, you know, it's certainly a tool that I would encourage all clubs to use, because you're going to get some interesting answers. Yeah.
And just thinking about Leanne's example of sports media, or thinking about that social media as well, we know that more broadly that women aren't represented in sports media as much as men, and that number is really disproportionate. You know, we have a look at the back page of the newspaper and it's usually men's sport rather than women's. So it might also, or it is an opportunity for community sport to say, look, we do have less women playing, but we actually want to make sure that we have a really big presence of those women on our social media to offset what's happening in the wider society. And to make sure that where girls aren't seeing pictures of women on the back page of the paper, they're seeing pictures of women really prominently on our social media and in our local paper and on our website. So it's also about clubs balancing out those inequalities that we're seeing more broadly and having that really important role in showing girls what they can be and what they can do, and being really proud of the achievements of the women at their clubs.
I think it's been wonderful to hear about what it's going to mean for the community, what it's going to mean for the club, as you know, individuals, as clubs progress through becoming more gender equitable. I suppose for those out there that are listening, both Jess and Leanne, and I might start with you, Jess. What are some quick wins that clubs can start doing now, and begin their pathway towards being more inclusive and more gender equitable?
Yeah, awesome. So, look, I feel really strongly about the quick win is really going onto the Wyndham website and having a look at those tools that you guys have created and doing that audit, or having those questions with your committee members around, you know, what steps do we want to take? And you will come up with those quick wins. So the quick wins might be, let's make sure we've got photos of women in our change rooms. Let's make sure that we are swapping it up, like Leanne says, in terms of what teams get called out. Those are the really quick wins that you can implement tomorrow. You can make these changes. And then there'll be other things that come up as well that are those slower, more cultural pieces of work that take time and many conversations. But there will be just so many quick wins that you can start to implement now.
What about for you, Leanne? Is there a top few that you could sort of recommend? Because your club is very much progressed down this pathway. Is there any quick wins that you can recommend for other clubs out there?
Probably nothing that Jess just hasn't mentioned. You know, the Wyndham, the site is exceptional. To take from that, present that at the committee meeting and start from there. And then speak to the influential people at the club. You know, they don't necessarily have to hold a role at the club to be that influential person. So, you know, chat to the senior coaches, chat to all the junior coaches. You know, if you've got a really big personality at the club, you know, have a chat to them and see what they're thinking and see what they can bring. You know, have the AFL and the AFLW players come down and, you know, research into different things like, are there women's bodies are shaped differently to men? So now we've got women's football shorts available based on of their body shape, and not all women will wear them, but have that as an option. You know, there's a new product with safety vests to protect women's chest area. You know, have that as an option. Let the teams know that option is out there, so that if anyone is feeling uneasy, it's just about providing options. You know, have someone at the club do the research, reach out to the Wyndham Council, reach out to your particular league, and ask for help. You know, if you know another club or you know of another competition that's doing it really well, you're not an enemy. You know, we've got to stick together to achieve what's best for everybody here. So, you know, put your hand up and say, hey, what can I do better? Because there's always room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, no matter who we are and where we're at on the gender equality scale. Basic, as Jess said, the quick wins, you know, huge difference.
And I love that point around talking to other people, Leanne. I think it's so important, and important to acknowledge as well that we might be talking to other sports too. We don't just have to talk to the same sport. And that sometimes when we are just talking to each other in terms of our sports, we have a little bit of an unconscious bias where we, that's the way footy's always done it. Whereas you go off and you can talk to cricket and go, wow, cricket's been doing it differently, or they've started to think about different approaches here as well, and the conversations are different. So it's so key is to getting together and speaking with each other and supporting each other as well to do this really important work.
And you have to celebrate those small wins. You know, if you've introduced a quick win, celebrate that, you know, celebrate with the committee. It might be so small, but we do need to give ourselves a pat on the back every now and then and celebrate that with the community, with your team members, you know, with your social media. It's small steps, but it could be that 1%, that 1%er that drags the next player to the club, you know, that goes, oh, I like what they've done there. I'm going to go and join that club. I want to be a part of that community, you know, whether it be a member, a player, or just a supporter. You know, clubs also are there to make money. They do run a business effectively. So, you know, they do want to have more than just players, you know, come down and watch their teams play. So, yeah, celebrate the 1%ers and certainly enjoy that moment, enjoy the moment, and then move on to the next quick win. So, yeah.
I think that's so important. You're saying celebrating and communicating what you're doing, because as clubs we just do everything and we take it for granted and it happens. But if we don't tell anybody what we're doing, people might not actually realise that that's actually available and out there. But as you said, it helps to bring in kind of like that wider audience. And then I really like the idea of sharing sort of like what's going on, because as you said, you know, clubs could buddy up. You know, we could be saying we've both got the same issue. What do you think about this? Do you think this could work? Or did this happen? And just being able to say, oh, yeah, that did happen. We tried this. That didn't work, but actually we found that this did work. And we found that happening quite a bit, James, haven't we, in our club networking sessions? And it was quite interesting recently how we almost kind of like had a little bubble of team sports and a little bubble of individual sports. And they were all learning off each other, but in a way we could almost have separated them into, let's have a team sport discussion, doesn't matter what sport it is, and let's have an individual sport discussion because of kind of like the alignment that's there. So James, could you just remind me, please, what the Wyndham website is and sort of what Wyndham clubs could actually do if they want to kind of start on this journey?
Yeah, thanks, Camilla. I think Leanne and Jess have touched on around what it takes to initiate this this journey towards gender equality, and I would recommend that the first step being to jump on the wonderful Women in Sports page that Camilla has designed and led. So it's got wonderful checks, audits, links to further information, case studies, so you might be able to reach out to these clubs that have experienced similar situations to you. So that website, and we'll include the link, is www.wyndham.vic.gov.au/women-sports. So it's our Wyndham page /women-sports, but we'll include the link there as an easier way to jump on and get some info. And the other avenue to getting some assistance is to reach out to one of the sport and recreation team members. Where we're here for you and here to see clubs develop into real shining lights for the community to look up to, and that they currently are, and to see some growth and development happen. We'd be really proud to work with any and every club in Wyndham within the gender equality space.
I feel like I've learnt so much today, so I really am thankful to both of you for giving up your time, and I think I'm going to go away and keep on thinking about sort of what more things we can do and to sort of really share sort of like this knowledge with other clubs. It's been fantastic, but I guess I'm thinking sort of in summary, small changes make big differences. And that clubs are made up of our local community. So we really want them to be reflective of the local community. And also, if you role model the good gender equality practice, that impact reaches widely into our community, so we can help to redress the balance and ensure that all our communities are actually able to have their say and improve their lives. So really sort of bringing it back, as Jess, you were saying about kind of like, clubs are the hub of the community, and we can help our communities get stronger, safer, more welcoming, more inclusive, more connected. But the other thing was that gender equality is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. We don't just wake up and it's where everybody's equal and everybody's respected and it's all fair. So and also that we're not always aware of inequality and we're not always aware of kind of like, we might think that, oh, you know, a man might do this and a woman might do that. So actually taking that step back and actually thinking about it and going, okay, yeah, maybe I need to rethink how I approach things and just to change those sort of entrenched practices in society. And just being aware that we all have a little key role to play in helping to make our communities just safer, more equal, fair and inclusive for everybody. So thank you, Dr. Jessica Croft, and thank you, Leanne Mayer. Really, really appreciate your time today. Thanks, James. And yeah, thank you. I'll be going away and having a good think.